The internal rot. How the capture of the Justice Department signals the end of American primacy and the coming global conflagration. Hello to everyone tuning in. It is good to be back with you to discuss the precarious state of the world and, more importantly, the rapidly disintegrating internal structure of the United States. We are witnessing a phenomenon that historians and realists have warned about for centuries, which is the inevitable decay of a hegemon, not from external pressure alone, but from a hollowing out of its core institutions. The story I am about to analyze regarding the Department of Justice, Donald Trump, and the Jeffrey Epstein files is not merely a tabloid scandal or a piece of domestic political gossip. It is a siren, a loud and terrifying signal that the machinery of the American state has ceased to function as an independent arbiter of law and has transformed into a personal instrument of political survival. When the central nervous system of a superpower is compromised, the body politic loses its coordination, and in the ruthlessly competitive arena of international politics, a confused giant is a target. We are standing on the precipice of a catastrophic global conflict, and the events unfolding in Washington tell us that we are utterly unprepared for what is coming. Let us look at the facts as they have been reported, specifically regarding the latest revelations about the Department of Justice social media accounts and the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein documents. According to recent reporting from Axios and analysis from legal experts like those at Midas Touch, we have crossed a Rubicon. We are told that the White House, specifically the team surrounding Donald Trump, has effectively seized control of the social media apparatus of the Department of Justice. This is a profound development. In a functioning liberal democracy, there is supposed to be a firewall between the executive branch's political interests and the judicial branch's enforcement mechanisms. That firewall has not just been breached, it has been demolished. The reporting suggests that the Department of Justice is now aggressively, preemptively exonerating Donald Trump regarding sealed documents and a specific handwritten letter allegedly from Jeffrey Epstein. Consider the implications of this. We are talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice, institutions that command thousands of agents and control the most sophisticated investigative machinery on the planet. Yet we are asked to believe that within 24 hours of a document surfacing, a handwritten letter that potentially implicates the president in the most sordid activities imaginable, these agencies have conducted a full forensic analysis, reviewed handwriting samples, tested ink and paper, and conclusively determined it to be a fake. This is, to put it mildly, an operational impossibility. Anyone who has studied how intelligence agencies or forensic bureaus work knows that validating a questioned document is a process that takes weeks, if not months. It requires exemplars, chemical analysis, and chain of custody verification. For the Department of Justice to issue a statement on its official letterhead broadcast to millions of people declaring this document fake and explicitly clearing Donald Trump before the review of the 700,000 pages of evidence is even complete tells us one thing. The Department of Justice is no longer speaking for the law. It is speaking for the man in the Oval Office. It is a case of ventriloquism, where the seal of the United States government is the dummy, and the political operatives of the Trump administration are the ones throwing their voices. This matters because in the world of great power politics, credibility is the only currency that truly holds value, aside from raw military force. If the United States government is willing to debase its own premier law enforcement agency to protect the reputation of a single leader against allegations of sexual misconduct, what does that say about its intelligence reports regarding Ukraine? What does that say about its economic data regarding inflation? What does that say to Beijing and Moscow about the reliability of Washington's word? Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is a former intelligence officer. He understands the utility of compromising institutions. When he sees the American Department of Justice acting like a personal protection racket, he does not see strength. He sees a state that is consuming itself. He sees a leadership so obsessed with internal survival and image management that it has abandoned the strategic discipline required to lead the free world. This perception of weakness is provocative. It invites aggression. It is the blood in the water that sharks like Putin and Xi Jinping have been waiting for. The specifics of this Epstein scandal are gruesome, but we must look past the sensationalism to the structural reality. We have reports of a control file, documents held by the Oversight Committee or the Epstein estate that are not under the direct control of the Trump White House. This creates a classic prisoner's dilemma and a power struggle within the elite. You have survivors and victims who are claiming they have their own files. You have Democrats holding a cache of documents, and you have the Trump administration frantically trying to sanitize the official release. This is not governance. This is gang warfare disguised as bureaucracy. It suggests that the American political elite is locked in a death spiral of mutual blackmail. When a country's leadership is paralyzed by the fear of what might come out in a sex trafficking file, they are not thinking about the grand strategy of the South China Sea. They are not thinking about the precariousness of the dollar. They are thinking about their own skins. And while they are looking inward, the wolves are gathering at the door. Let us expand our view to the global chessboard. While Donald Trump and his handlers are reportedly writing tweets for the Department of Justice to claim a letter to Larry Nassar is a forgery, the geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting with violent force. The war in Ukraine is reaching a critical, perhaps terminal phase. The Russians are grinding forward, utilizing a strategy of attrition that plays to their strengths: manpower, artillery, and a high tolerance for pain. The Ukrainians are exhausted, the West is fractured, and now the Europeans are looking at Washington and seeing a circus. They see a Department of Justice that cannot even truthfully report on a court filing without political interference. Do you think the Germans or the French will trust American leadership on NATO security guarantees when the American House is in such visible disarray? Donald Trump has claimed he can end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. This is rhetoric, of course, but let us analyze the realism behind it. If his administration is this focused on burying the Epstein story, his capacity to negotiate a complex peace deal that satisfies the security imperatives of both Moscow and Kyiv is virtually non-existent. He is likely to look for a quick exit, a deal that freezes the conflict but ultimately signals to the world that American resolve is finite. This will be read in Beijing as a green light. Xi Jinping has been very clear about his ambitions regarding Taiwan. He observes the United States distracted by these internal scandals, tearing itself apart over decades-old crimes and corruption, and he calculates that the cost of intervention for the United States is becoming too high. If the American people are demoralized by the corruption of their own justice system, will they send their sons and daughters to die for Taipei? It is highly unlikely. We must also consider the economic dimension, which is inextricably linked to this political decay. The markets hate uncertainty, but they hate incompetence more. We have seen figures like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates maneuvering their assets, hedging against what they see as a coming storm. Elon Musk has inserted himself directly into the political machinery, understanding that in this new era, proximity to power is more important than market efficiency. This is the hallmark of an oligarchy, not a free market democracy. When the Department of Justice is captured, the rule of law regarding contracts, regulations, and property rights becomes fluid. It becomes dependent on political favor. This stifles innovation and scares away capital. The American economy is fragile, burdened by debt and inflation. If we enter a kinetic war with a peer competitor, which is a distinct possibility given the trajectory of escalation, the economic shock will be immediate and devastating. Imagine a scenario where supply chains from Asia are severed because of a conflict in the Pacific, precisely at a moment when the American government is paralyzed by constitutional crises and internal purges. The standard of living for the average American will collapse. The fake letter narrative is particularly instructive of the mindset in Washington. The administration is asking you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. They are engaging in what we call gaslighting on an industrial scale. They claim the handwriting does not match, yet they admit they did not have time to do a proper analysis. They claim the postmark is wrong, yet they ignore the reality of how prison mail systems work. They are relying on the sheer volume of information to overwhelm the public's capacity for critical thought. This is a tactic used by authoritarian regimes to induce a state of political apathy. If everything is fake, then nothing is true. And if nothing is true, then you cannot resist. But reality has a way of asserting itself. You can spin a story about a letter, but you cannot spin the physics of a hypersonic missile. You cannot spin the mathematics of a debt crisis. You cannot spin the body bags that will come home if we stumble into a war because our leaders were too busy covering their tracks to notice the enemy maneuvering. There is a palpable fear rising in the American populace, and it is justified. People sense that the adults have left the room. They look at the Department of Justice, once the most feared and respected law enforcement body in the world, and they see a public relations firm for the executive branch. This erosion of trust is fatal for a democracy. It leads to civil unrest. It leads to the rise of vigilantism. It leads to a fragmentation of the social contract. And a fragmented America is a weak America. The Chinese Communist Party has a strategy of winning without fighting, which involves exploiting the internal divisions of their adversary. They do not need to invade California. They just need to wait for Washington to destroy its own credibility. And right now, by politicizing the Justice Department to this extreme degree, the Trump administration is doing Beijing's work for them. Let us talk about the specific danger of war in the coming months. The tensions in the Middle East are boiling over. The conflict in Eastern Europe is grinding on. The Pacific is a powder keg. In past eras, the United States acted as a dampener on these fires, using its diplomatic weight and the credibility of its institutions to de-escalate. But who will listen to an American envoy now? Who will believe the promises of the State Department when the Justice Department is blatantly lying to its own citizens about criminal investigations? The loss of moral authority translates directly into a loss of diplomatic leverage. This means that force becomes the only remaining tool, and when you reach for the hammer because you have lost the ability to use your voice, you make everything look like a nail. We are seeing an escalation cycle where the United States, feeling insecure and threatened by its own decline, may lash out. Or, conversely, adversaries may calculate that this is the moment to strike while the giant is distracted by the Epstein files. Donald Trump, in his rhetoric, often appeals to a certain realist instinct, the idea of America first, of avoiding foreign entanglements. However, his actions, particularly this brazen capture of the judicial apparatus, undermine the very sovereignty he claims to protect. A sovereign nation must be ruled by laws, not by men. If the Department of Justice is merely a shield for the president, then the state has become personal property. This is the structure of a banana republic, not a constitutional republic. And history shows us that personalized dictatorships are often erratic, prone to miscalculation, and vulnerable to manipulation. If Putin or Xi holds compromising material, the real control file on the American leadership, then American foreign policy is compromised. We have to ask the hard question: is the aggressive defense of Trump regarding Epstein merely about domestic politics, or is there a foreign leverage component? Are we seeing a cover-up because the truth would reveal that the President of the United States is susceptible to coercion by foreign intelligence services? This is the nightmare scenario for national security. The average American needs to understand what this means for their daily life. It means that the institutions you rely on to keep your water clean, your banks solvent, and your streets safe are no longer focused on their mission. They are focused on protecting the leader. It means that if there is another pandemic, or a financial crash, or a terrorist attack, the response will be filtered through the lens of how does this help the president, rather than how does this save the country. It means that the checks and balances that were designed to prevent tyranny have failed, and when tyranny takes root at home, it usually seeks enemies abroad to justify its existence. We could very well see a wag-the-dog scenario, where a conflict is manufactured or escalated to distract the public from the sordid details of the Epstein scandal. We are looking at a future where the distinction between truth and lies is erased by government decree. The Department of Justice posting on social media that a letter is fake without evidence is a test. They are testing the public's submission. If they can get away with this, they can get away with anything. They can tell you that the inflation rate is 0 when you can't afford bread. They can tell you that the war is going well when the fleet is sinking. They can tell you that you are free when you are under surveillance. This is the path to serfdom, paved with official tweets. The tragedy is that the United States has all the latent power it needs to remain secure. We have favorable geography, abundant resources, and a talented population, but we are being rotted from the head down. The fish rots from the head, as the saying goes. The corruption of the legal system is the final stage of institutional decay. It signals that the elite have decided to loot the ship rather than steer it. And as they loot the ship, they are ignoring the iceberg. The iceberg is the shifting balance of power in the international system. China is building a navy that rivals our own. Russia has transitioned to a war economy. Iran is moving toward nuclear latency. These are existential threats. Dealing with them requires a unified, serious, and clean government. We have none of those things. We have a reality TV show being run out of the Department of Justice. In conclusion, the situation is dire. The capture of the Department of Justice's voice by the Trump White House is a symptom of a much deeper terminal illness in the American body politic. It destroys the rule of law, invites foreign aggression, and distracts from the existential dangers gathering on the horizon. We are sleepwalking into a major power war with a government that is more concerned about hiding the past sins of its leader than securing the future of its people. The danger of war is not just high, it is imminent. The weakness is provocative, the corruption is absolute. And unless there is a miraculous reversal of this trend, the history books will record this era as the moment the American empire officially ceased to be a serious nation. Thank you for listening. I hope you will join me again as we continue to monitor this unraveling. It is not a happy story, but it is one we must face with open eyes.